Hello, and welcome to the Grand Cinema Hotel, a podcast hosted by two friends who love cinema. Tonight, you'll be staying in room 167, Midsommar, the second film by Ari Aster. So go ahead, get comfortable, and throw on that Do Not Disturb sign as we immerse ourselves in a disturbing summer fairy tale with Midsommar.
What am I going through?
We just need to acclimate.
I don't want to acclimate, I want to go.
Absolutely not.
What's happening?
What's going on, all my children of the Harga, and thank you for checking back in. I'm Gus. As always, I'm joined by Alvaro.
What's up, guys?
And we're here to talk about Ari Aster's second film, 2019's Midsommar. Before we do that, make sure you like and subscribe and comment. If you're on YouTube, go ahead and share that. Do whatever you got to do. Helps the show out immensely. Alvaro, do you remember your first experience watching Midsommar?
We watched this one together?
No, we didn't. I have my own story about this. That's why I'm asking.
Midsommar. Yeah, I think, what I will say about this, I think this was already when I was very invested in A24 slate. It was whenever I would actively started searching up their things and whatever it was that they were dropping. And I remember knowing that this was Ari Aster's second film. And it was funny because we just watched the trailer before this to try to remember. I didn't know what to expect after I walked out of the trailer, like seeing the trailer. And I don't really remember. I remember seeing this in the theaters. I don't remember if I saw it with my ex at the time. I remember just thinking it had the same qualities of Hereditary that I ended up finding out that I really stand out to me to Ari Aster, and I think it is just very well structurally made films, which I think, funny enough, because you have the 4K physical copy of it too, the little prelude, Martin Scorsese talking about it. I think that is like the reason I think these movies even probably caught his attention. I think they do remind me in a way that Martin Scorsese takes the time to develop his stories and kind of how he chooses weird ways to take moments of violence to connect with maybe his personal beliefs of any situation. So I think those are the reasons this movie has stood out to me the first time. I remember thinking, though, I didn't think it was very scary. And I think I still feel that way. Mm-hmm. So it's a very interesting second film for me from Ari Aster.
Nice. So the reason I asked if you specifically remembered was because I saw this movie 4th of July, 2019. And the reason I remember that and that date always sticks out to me is because me and my wife were at a diner and there was an earthquake. And like I'll never forget that it felt kind of like just like some ominous thing, like, oh shit, I'm about to go watch this scary movie and there was an earthquake right before, right? Like, so it's just something that always stands out to me as like a date that I'll remember. And then I also remember that when I was watching this movie, this is definitely one of those ones where I heard a lot of like, ugh. Like by the time the movie was over, I remember everybody just like marching out very disappointed. And I think me and my wife and maybe like 5 other people were the only ones who actually enjoyed this or were excited about what they had just seen. So it always stands out to me for that reason as well, that this was like oh man, people did not like this. Like at least the group that I saw it with, my theater experience.
Yeah. And I mean, that's kind of the conversation we were having before the pod about a general consensus that I think even people like Hereditary more than this movie, like generally, But I think, I mean, we'll get into it. Maybe I'll wait to kind of cover what I wanted to say. But this movie, the same thing as we talked about Hereditary yesterday, doesn't. It seems to be that like the way that his very careful, methodical way of dishing out these movies, especially how he said that he wrote this kind of like a breakup movie.
Yeah,
I think I just kind of like what I wanted to say is like I just appreciate that he's able to come up with a vision like this for feelings that I think we all have, and I think that's kind of where directors really truly shine, and like directors that I like that truly have a style. I know kind of the one that comes to mind is like Cronenberg, for example. Like there's these very personal thoughts or opinions that they have, and they're able to kind of convey those things through film, but then also not really push you to what are those opinions, you know? And I think that they're sometimes, whether you agree or not with those opinions, or if you can see or not see those opinions, really kind of dictates how much you like the movie, I think.
Yeah, I think Cronenberg is a good comparison, not because of the contents of the movie, but just because what you were saying about style. I think if you maybe take a film like Crimes of the Future, and if you're not really trying to deeply analyze it, you might miss all of those points. But I think that he hides it well enough to where he's not like actually beating you over the head.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
it, you know, and I kind of feel like Ari Aster is the same. And maybe that's one of the reasons some people don't like it, you know, is because they don't necessarily find it scary, and then it's extremely long, and then, you know, I think when you don't convey a message in a way that's like heavy-handed to some people, it's kind of like, so what the hell was that? You know, like, what am I supposed to take away from this? I think it's extremely obvious. I don't necessarily think that Ari Aster is an accessible filmmaker, really. Like, I do think it is more of the cinematically inclined are more likely to find these films to be very deep and also extremely entertaining at the same time. You know, like, I don't think if I showed my dad Midsommar, he would be like, yeah, I get it that was a breakup movie. He'd probably be like, what the hell was I watching? You know?
Yeah, 'cause I mean, for some reason, horror gets that label the most from the crowd, from the general crowd. Like, what the hell was that? Or what was the point of that?
Yeah.
I think horror gets that the most with any of their movies, because there's a lot of movies that are quote unquote that I can't think off the top of my head that maybe like Paranormal Activity, for example. The people eat it up, and that's why they kept making so many of them. And it's all very
because there's no what is this?
Yeah,
you know exactly what it is.
and it's like ghost scary, right?
Yeah.
Ghost scares people, and I think what I really wanted to say, kind of adding to what you're talking about, the reason why these movies maybe don't deliver to everybody as hard, is I think that a lot of Ari Aster's horror lies in, again, kind of you really indulging with the character, and kind of, especially here, Danny, really feeling how terrible of a situation this would be for somebody like her. I think is unimaginable. And maybe for some people, because they can't really indulge into the character, that in itself isn't a horror vehicle enough for all of the moments when there is physical moments of horror, because those moments are supposed to kind of be where the boat's been tipped, where everything is kind of really culminating and getting out of hand. Those are moments of explosion. Those are moments, because there's so much fear and horror there. That's why we're seeing physical depictions of it. But I think for the most of the movie, it is really this tension built between, in this movie, for example, as compared to Hereditary, is the dynamic between every character here and the one they have within themselves, and also the big struggling, obviously, issue, overlonging thing of her family having killed herself. I think that is kind of similar to what we talked about last week in Hereditary. For someone that can connect to something like that, kind of how you talked about personal connections to Hereditary, for anybody who might have been in a situation like this, and I mean, I personally haven't, but I could imagine this would be one of the worst things you could imagine. So to me, that's where the horror does come in. You know?
So I think his films, now having watched both of them back to back, they're all about, well, I can't say all of them because we haven't seen Beau is Afraid yet, but at least the first two, they're really about like the human emotions that they go through when they suffer these extremely traumatic losses. They're both about death, right? But they're both about like extremely gruesome deaths too, you know? Like, it isn't just like, oh, my dad had a heart attack and now I'm breaking up with my boyfriend.
It's accidents.
No, it's like it's like one of the, like, we're watching it right now. We just have it on the TV. And the scene where, this is going to be a full spoilers episode. So the scene where,
Danny's sister.
You know, we see Danny's sister, how she killed herself with the gas from the garage or the gas from the car in the garage, right? But how she also killed her parents by doing that as well. You know, we commented how it looked like it was peaceful, right, for the parents, but then you cut to the other side of the room and you see her sister with the nozzles just like taped to her mouth, and she kind of looks like she exploded from the inside. Yeah. You know, like, it's just really disturbing imagery, like you said, where it like it jumps. They're not jump scares, but the horror is just like really fucking like pushed to its limit, you know, and in a subtle way. It's not like blaring music, you know, flash cut where it just zooms in on them. You know, it's played in a way where you're just like, oh my god, you know, like not that you actually jump, but it just like it takes you a second to realize what you're looking at, you know. And I felt that way with the Charlie's head in Hereditary as well, you know. So just these deeply sad moments, like at least the first halves of both films.
And they're moments of tragedy. Like I said, they're not moments that, I mean, all deaths are unexpected, but they just come out of what feels like complete unfairness.
Yeah.
It doesn't come out of like, you know, Charlie was running on a bridge, or she was like, you know, jumping on stuff, and or Danny's family was actually really terrible to her sister. Nope. It's just all people who you could, I feel like as a person who has, you know, pretty good family, I can relate to these things happening to them and how deeply like I would feel like I wish I could have done something.
Yeah, like some people might think it's melodramatic or overacting or whatever, but I honestly think that the way he conveys loss and how people feel it, like in their deepest, like most secret sad moments, you know, like I do think that he conveys it better than anybody else. Like the way that he gets his actresses to cry, like that's like the realest crying I've ever heard, you know, because it's so ugly and it's so beyond any like sense of trying to have any control, you know. It's just like a full release.
Yeah,
I love
agree.
that. You know. Yeah,
I think that is for me what makes it. For some people, it might seem like it might be. I mean, maybe overacting is the right word here, or it doesn't hit a right note where they'd be like, that's not how people cry. But if you've actually seen somebody who thoroughly has loss, it's never something. It's not a good sound, and it's sound that's usually like very piercing. And I think, especially in this movie when Danny's crying, I think for me, that's how I know maybe I am a pretty avid, or this is why I enjoy films, is even if I don't like the movie too much, or if I really enjoy the movie, it doesn't really dictate or the difference of certain scenes that try to get me with emotion. They usually get me. And it could be as simple as, I mean, this is kind of a sidetrack, but we watched Mario recently, and there's, as soon as a movie that dumb, there's little scenes where, oh, he conquered or whatever, or he beat the bad guy, and those emotions get me like, yeah, hell yeah, you know. And then, but like obviously when a movie's really really good, that's how I dictate it. And like Danny crying in this movie, I think for it to be in the first 10 minutes, her ugly cry, and I think I already kind of feel for her so much, like she's a real person. And I think that's usually when I know a character is very well, is being set up really well for me to care about them. Because there's issues usually in other movies where you get to the end and you're like, but why should I care? Because I don't feel that I care.
Yeah, you have to connect to the characters, and I think that he makes his two main characters very relatable, and also someone you care about, even though it's kind of the whole thing's like a sticky, ugly situation, you know. But I kind of wanted to get back to this, what you were saying about like how much of a horror movie is this really? So on paper, it's technically a horror movie, but with enough time passed now, do you actually think of it as a horror movie? I kind of don't. I think of it more as just like a disturbing fairy tale. And when I say that, I do mean like an old fairy tale where they're like, and then the children got eaten at the end, you know, like. So I don't really think of it as horror the more the time passes, you know.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you there. I wouldn't know where I would put it, but I think this movie reminds me a lot of like The Wicker Man, right? That's like a lot of the connection of it. I think even Ari
that's
Aster's
like the easy one for people to be like, this is this.
But I would say that even The Wicker Man has more leaning on why it's a horror film. The stuff that's kind of leaning on there
that's
is
like a straight up slasher film.
Exactly.
Really.
And then
like a cult slasher
But
film.
I think the dynamic that this has, because so much of the first half and so much of the moments with Danny, our main character, are in her brain, in her emotions. And I think most horror movies don't really take the time, or most horror directors don't really take that time to put you in that state of mind, because it's not usually really a mentally, emotionally driven state of mind. Usually, like, for example, another horror movie, we have so many that we've done here, is like Scream. We never really get Sidney Prescott's emotions. Like we do in slightly.
It's easy to just be like, oh, her mom died. She keeps getting hunted down. I feel for her. It's simple. You don't even have to try to make. You don't have to try. You know.
And now she's being hunted by a guy with a knife. But
and
here,
also she can never let this go because she keeps getting brought up.
yeah,
You know?
so it's like it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And already, it's not a factor. But here, the horror does lies in between Danny's personal struggle to get over this, because this is something that a regular person in a real world in a movie set like this at Ari Aster really creates an atmosphere that's trying to be as relatable to real life as it can be. Mass suicide, homicide, whatever you would consider this, would be terrorizing for years.
Yeah.
Like you would never get over
he
this.
He truly understands no, this is gonna haunt you forever.
Yeah,
not
no.
just 6 months, a year, whatever.
Yeah,
You know?
like I obviously there is people have always had really major losses, and there are some people who understand the notion of every day continues and you have to get up and keep going. But I think that there is also never really an appeal or much of a discussion of people who do not have those feelings, and people who really do get stuck in time and get stuck emotionally somewhere because they long for something that I think is completely normal for a person to miss any of their loved ones. And I think Ari Aster kind of understands. And I kind of wanted to make this comparison is that in the beginning of Hereditary, we kind of get that whole monologue of her talking about the issue she had with her mom, right?
Yeah.
And those moments of her taking the time, Ari Aster taking the time to make the character, us present us with that, is when we start connecting with the characters, you know? And here, Danny is thrown into this crazy situation that in other movies might be the tipping point. It might be the reason. The whole movie would be the reason, finding out what is the reason why her sister killed herself.
Mm-hmm.
Like what happened. And here it's just the catalyst to
The journey she's gonna go on.
yeah, like she's emotionally be putting in a state, and it kind of opens her eyes to a lot of things going on around her, which I think this movie actually does really well, because this movie presents her, and she is a very smart person. She's in the university, and she's doing psychology, and I think that throughout the whole movie, she's very aware of the situation that she's going through and the situation that her relationship is going through. And I think that to still now throw in this aspect of her personal loss and being in that emotional state, I think is what kind of makes it her have like that clear vision, right? Mm-hmm. But that's kind of where the quote unquote macabre comes from, because it's kind of like she's already in a really weird, I don't care for anybody else kind of state of mind.
Yeah, like, we have the Payman moments in Hereditary where, like, the stare, like almost like a Kubrick like stare, you know what I mean? Where you're like, oh, that's the moment that they became possessed, right?
Correct.
And in this one, obviously his Kubrick stare would be the fucking her with the flower crown staring at the burning, like, this is the killing off my old life and this is the beginning of my new one, right? And I just wanted to say, I wanted to bring that up because it's like in one movie it's a demon, and in this one it's not anything supernatural. It's just like a full acceptance,
personal,
of, like, the death of the everything old about me, and this is like it's like a rebirth movie almost, and since we were kind of talking about his style, I think another great thing about it is that both movies are distinctly two halves. Like the horror is kind of saved for the second half. Like that's where you get the full blown, what the fuck, mind fuck type of horror. And that's really good. But I also don't think it's fair to categorize the movies as both just flat out horrors. Like it's a drama with horror elements, and like this is like a fairy tale breakup movie with horror elements, Yeah. This one is definitely not as scary as Hereditary. I mean, maybe if you're a shitty boyfriend, this is the scariest movie you've ever seen. But I don't necessarily think of this one as so scary. I just think it's this really beautiful, disturbing experience. Like, I think this movie is more of an experience than Hereditary is. Hereditary is more associated with like a structured narrative, 3 acts. Bop, 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 bop. We're doing this to get here. And I do think that this movie is much more about the, like, fully immersing you into it. I think that's why it's so long. I think that's why it's so, like, precise. You know what I mean? I think that's why it's a long journey just to get to the, the village or whatever. I think all of that is on purpose. And I think there's just so many small, intricate details that he lays out. Like, he's so technically gifted as a filmmaker, and I do think that this is like the full display. Like, I don't think Hereditary is as much of a display as this movie is.
Yeah, I mean,
Even though I like the other movie more.
I will say I think that kind of an ode to his ambition in this movie. That kind of just stand out to me is the obvious one, which is the juxtaposition of making this horror movie in a very bright, beautiful setting. I think that is very ambitious for many directors to try to do, and whether I think that might be too ambitious for a regular viewer. I think that's kind of what tones down the horror for some people. The fact that it looks so beautiful, and the fact that we have scenes that I kind of remember talking about this years ago, and I've seen this being brought up a lot. There's scenes like where they're constantly on drugs in this movie because they're college students.
That's another piece of his style is that all of the characters are somehow under the influence of something.
And in this movie,
even in Beau is Afraid,
I think for a second, there's a moment of tranquility when they're taking drugs, and I think there's some peace that is brought to Danny's character, which I think when you're watching it, it kind of makes you feel like it just makes you feel happy for her because you're kind of like, well, look, she did get out of the house, she's in Sweden, and maybe things are looking up. And then just one mention of family from one of the characters, because he's also tripping out and kind of having a great time and saying how they all feel like a family to him, completely makes her trip go the other way. And the reason I bring that up though is because even that aspect, which I think a lot of people who have been open to doing hallucinogenics have kind of just said that is probably one of the most accurate depictions of it.
I was literally just about to say that I do. This is what shrooms is like. When you see the trees moving, it's not, it isn't all of this other stuff that people make it seem like.
Into the void type stuff.
Yeah, no, it's not. But when you see the trees swaying and everything's kind of blending together and you get those like refractions in the light and stuff like that, like that's what it's like. Like he got that down about as accurately as I've seen.
But I will say, I think that the major aspect to me that kind of, as somebody who has been maybe open to them but not wanting to because of a mental, state, I think that's kind of what
your ego, brother.
I think it's kind of really, that's what the movie gets really well because she goes from having a really good trip to a really bad trip because she is kind of cover where she is emotionally and mentally, and when she's actually remembered or reminded of where she actually is. A drug like that, what really does is kind of really indulge you into those emotions, and whether you'd be ready or not to confront those is a whole other discussion. But I think at the time she obviously isn't. As this movie develops, I think through the loving power of everybody here, when she kind of becomes validated through her feelings, I think that's when she really starts to deal with those emotions, and I think that's when we end up seeing the May Queen.
I was thinking about it right now, and I had thought about this yesterday when I was watching this in preparation. One of the reasons I think it's such a good companion piece with Hereditary, and kind of like the flip side of the coin, is how in that movie the family is so disjointed, right? And in this movie, that's like the one thing that she has going for her, is that she's been welcomed into this new family. And how like they cry together, they literally, we ride together, we die together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you laugh, I laugh, you cry, I cry. And that's completely missing in Hereditary. Especially like the dinner scene. The big breakout, and how we talked about how like the dad had no time or chance to be vulnerable at all. He's trying to hold the whole thing together, but in this one, I think he kind of shows that no matter what side of the coin it is, like it can be really terrifying either way, because this is some of the disturbing stuff in the movie that I remember my audience members not really enjoying, when you see the all these naked older women or fucking,
that's cultural stuff
when they cry together, and it's like, I remember how thinking to myself, I'm like, I'm sure people who are passing by this theater on the way to theirs are probably like, what is going on in that movie? Because you just like,
and it's exactly what it sounds like.
Yeah, it's 20 people crying.
Yeah, I mean, I will say another aspect that I obviously, because we've watched them back to back, there's so comparisons that I think really is what becomes the Ari Aster style up until now, which I think from seeing Beau's Afraid trailers, he's kind of maybe trying to verge off of us being so knowing what to expect from him, which is always something good from a director. But both tied to cults, right? This one, but we get to live with the cult in this one a little bit more than we do in Hereditary,
and less supernatural. This
and
one is less supernatural.
I will say that that's where the juxtaposition kind of comes in, though, is that besides, I want to talk about the similarities first. Is that there is this appreciation for what life is and can be in the cults for these, and that's kind of, I feel like that's such a realistic aspect of cults, and I think you know, and with Payman, they kind of just want to make sure that they live a good life past this life, right? Mm-hmm. But I think in, you know, the cult here, it's all about kind of really appreciating the really, like, serving a community, and how much giving a bad life up is kind of seen as a disrespect.
Well, you know, now that you bring it up, it's like, what does this group of people technically do wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
Because those people who died willingly died.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing they do wrong is kill the outsiders, which is honestly like, yeah, okay, that's a bad thing to do, right? Like, but in the world of this movie, it's kind of just like something I'd be willing to look past, you know, because like, you're gonna put our shit out there. Obviously, no one's gonna understand this. We're more connected to nature than anybody else is, you know. Like they're a cult that makes sense, you know what I mean? Like they're very enticing. This might be one of the cults I've seen on all forms of media that I was like, yeah, no, I get it. You know, like I get why you would want to be here.
Yeah. I also, I guess there's like a. Wait, actually, sorry, I completely lost my train of thought.
No, that's fine, but yeah, I do find this to be extremely appealing, you know, except for the fact that I probably wouldn't be welcomed in this cult. But
oh, I was gonna say the comparison that I was drawing is that you know, when you see those videos of this, you know, Christian or reporter went into this rural island to this tribe who's never, you know. We've kept them over there because they wanted to be by themselves.
Be like some Brazilian tribe kills a journalist. You know, they speared him from 25 feet out.
Yeah, and then it's because the same thing. We've kind of respected that we might not be in agreement with the stuff that they do, but we also at this point we just don't understand. And I think because these people are white, that might be seen as something like these tribes exist. Like this is this isn't a regular Swedish. These aren't Swedish people. All Swedish people are like this. This is a tribe. And they talk about how small it is of a place that they live in. They live so far from Stockholm. So I think that that's something maybe that this movie, based off of them being white, kind of just gets like, well, why would they, kind of why would they kill them? They did nothing wrong in my, okay. They all kind of disrespect them in some way. And so that's why they kind of all get killed or whatever. But it also, like what you said, that they don't want their secrets being taken out, and that's a big driving point when he has to talk to the elders about it. Mm-hmm. You know, but I mean, they all try to take. They're trying to indulge in this culture. A lot of them for different reasons. Pele's obviously, they all have a scheme in his brother here, but the only one I kind of don't understand, maybe it comes out of jealousy, is like Connie and her boyfriend. What did they I guess maybe. They thought they would snitch because they freaked out at the ceremony, right?
That's kind of, you got to cover your tracks.
Yeah, right.
Like, of course, the police are like normal Swedish police are not going to understand that this guy sacrificed himself, and then we had to bash his head in with the hammer because he didn't actually die. Like, I'm going to jail. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if somebody finds out. So I think for them, it's just covering their tracks. But everybody else, yeah, like you said, this cult worships the earth so much, right? Like, even with one of the things that the director's cut adds is a nighttime scene where they're saying they need to pay thanks to their goddess or the earth or whatever, right? And a small child is going to sacrifice themselves, you know, to kind of replace like what they've taken from the earth, right? But then you have this group of American outsiders, and all they're gonna do is take, and they also, like you said, they keep disrespecting them. They don't understand this place. They don't take it serious. So obviously, killing them is wrong. I mean, you know, but in terms of a movie, you're like, okay, this all makes sense. Like, no shit, they killed them.
I mean, Danny,
like when you put the movie lights on, or when you put the movie glasses on, you're like, of course they killed them.
And I mean, Danny is the only one that Pele kind of knows here that has been brought. He didn't invite her. So this is the same way in the Menu, where they're like, well, you're not supposed to be here,
but she's one of them.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Hey, we talked about this when we talked about the menu. That the menu ripped off a lot of Midsommar, like almost the entire thing. Honestly, now that I'm thinking about it.
but she's not supposed to be here, so I think Pele from a get go kind of obviously reaches out to her and lets her know that she thinks Christian
Christian. That's how she says
is
it like 2 or 3 times.
a piece of
Maybe
shit.
it's just because she's British and she can't hide it.
I think that's what it is. But and just lets him know that she thinks he's actually a piece of shit. It kind of lies to him and be like, I like him, but there's all these, and I don't think he likes him. I just think that he understands that she was brought in him trying to be this facade of everything that his lifestyle is. I'm in the university. I must be pretty smart. He takes the thesis, I must be pretty happy. I'm in a 4-year relationship. Doesn't really treat his girlfriend very well. I think that Pele just like, this guy's got to go.
Not good.
Yeah, but his girl, I was like, she didn't do nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of, because it's a fairy tale, it really is the hero's journey too, like she becomes accepted by this or by this group of people, and it's kind of like this is the family she's always been looking for. So, for her it's the happiest of endings, honestly, and good for her, right? This is the most good for her movie.
She also actively, like kind of what you were saying, she's the only one that actively wants to participate in all of this stuff.
I mean, obviously besides the killing shit, because that drives her over edge, but then,
yeah, like
she becomes the maid queen.
When it is when they're
she
cooking
makes meat pies.
Yeah, when they're making meat pies. Yeah, I think she didn't disrespect them in any way. Because maybe I think it has to do with her being so wanting to flip her mood the whole time and being so obviously in the moments of her downness, being so lost to where she even was anyways. I just think she didn't even really have time to disrespect them. I think when she wants to leave, she never actively like disrespects any of them in the community, and I think that ends up saving her.
She doesn't piss on the tree of their dead ancestors.
She doesn't take pictures of the stuff she's not supposed to.
Stealing their information, to put out there. I kind of wanted to get into the movie a bit more, like actually in detail and stuff like that. So, one of the things I really love about the movie in the beginning, and I guess this is just a trend now with Ari Aster's movies, is how there's so many intricate details, right? And how the movie, especially this one, is laid out for you in its entirety within one of the first frames, with that tapestry thing or that long painting or scroll or whatever it is. And like Hereditary, I do think that this movie is a lot more interesting when you rewatch it, because you're like, holy shit, it's all right there in the beginning. And yeah, maybe if you're the smartest movie watcher in the world, you saw this all coming, right? But upon that second, third, fourth rewatch, every time you take a little bit more, you're like, wow, that was just blatantly obvious from the very beginning. Every single thing that was going to happen, right? And I think that kind of adds to it, like how good of a filmmaker he is, that the more you watch it, you're like, oh, like you really didn't hide anything. It's just, how could I have ever known this the first time, And I think that's what makes these really deep, like rich, layered text. Well, at least the dialogue, you know what I mean?
I had seen this was I guess a complaint that I had seen from somebody, and somebody kind of indulging on the reason why they counter it, and I think it's pretty accurate, I would say, in terms of how I feel about this movie, is that they don't really, some of the complaints is that they don't really think this movie is as deep as maybe Ari, or most people give it the credit for, or the Ari Aster might supposedly think that it is. But the person who was saying that, he's like, I understand that, and maybe basically I don't agree with some of the points of what he thinks, what it is to be in a toxic relationship is, but I have to respect that he completely indulges himself to his opinion and makes the style of the movie just fall into that. And I think he, we had already kind of talked about this, but how it doesn't feel very heavy force, but he completely leans into it. And I think it's even as simple as, we're watching it again, the barn being completely this whole story, the whole story of the barn being everywhere, drawn out. And I think it is, like you said, those emotional moments where we get those mental battles within our characters. I think those are just completely dive-ins that Ari Aster feels very comfortable portraying, because maybe he himself has been in those moments, or he knows somebody, that has been. And I think those are the things that thoroughly really appreciate about them. And then and this movie specifically, and we'll get there, is the sets. I think the sets are really beautiful in this movie.
Yeah, like technically, what a good use of the budget,
Mm-hmm.
right? Just a beautiful movie all around. So, since I have the book here, because the DVD, the one that A24 released is, it's a DVD and a book in one, right? So let's just go ahead and read out some of the people involved with the movie. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So written and directed by Ari Aster, second film, right? Returning as the cinematographer is Paweł Pogorzelski. I've probably destroyed that. One of the big differences in this movie is the score, which I think is way different. Even though the movies are companion pieces, I do think that these couldn't be any more different. And it's this one was done by Bobby Krilic, and the first one was done by Colin Stetson. And that's a tough one for me, which one I like more. There's some beautiful flute work in this film. I'll just say that, like the Midsommar soundtrack is something I would listen to, if I was going to take some shrooms, or if, oh, let's go on a little smoke break. Yeah. I'd be like, oof, bump that Midsommar music. Just sit there with my eyes closed, breathing in deeply, trying to hit that Ethan Hawke in fucking First Reformed, where I'm floating over the world. You know what I mean? Like, it's the kind of music I'd listen to while I was floating over the world.
The Jesse Pinkman?
Yeah. Or if I was when I got knocked out as the Big Lebowski and I'm floating over the city.
Nice. Yeah.
This is the kind of music I would like to hear. It definitely sets an entirely different vibe for the movie. So you do learn with Ari Aster that it's like the music is one of the big things for setting the tone here. And I think maybe that's why it's not as scary either, It's because this music's a little too beautiful to be scared.
The music has a lot of this is scary to you energy.
Yeah. I'm chilling.
Yeah.
I'm the most comfortable I've ever been.
Be like, this is normal to me.
Who else did I want to bring up? The costume designer. We didn't do this last time, but I think this is the type of movie where you actually should bring this up.
Yeah.
So Andrea Flesch. I'm not going to pretend I know who that is, but shout out, because it's one of the best parts of this movie. And then let's see here. Production designer. We should probably bring that up because you just talked about how gorgeous the sets are. Henrik Svensson. So just by that name, I can tell this guy's probably got some experience with this stuff. So I'm going to guess it's pretty accurate.
Yeah. I will say this is the second movie, this is the second of the third movies that he also used the same editor, which is Lucian Johnson. There's a shot here it's also in the trailer, but I always thought about it, even after years of not seeing this movie, was the one where she's in the bathroom in the airplane. When she's crying and she opens the door.
When she opens the door in the dorm and it cuts to the airplane bathroom.
Yeah, I know it's such a simple shot, but I just love it because it's so seamless.
Movies.
It's so seamless.
That's what movies do.
Yeah, it's so seamless, and it almost does seem like they shot it as like there was an overhead shot, and she does go into like what would have been like the plane.
Since you brought up the editing, I kind of wanted to talk about the passage of time too. Because yesterday when I was rewatching this with my wife, this is her comfort movie, which kind of scares me. I'm like, what are you telling me? Every time we're like, hey, you want to watch Midsommar? But she's like, how much time do you think passes between the death of the family and this trip, right? Because something I actually never paid attention to, and it's one of those small details, is that when the firefighters show up to they show up on the scene or whatever, there's Christmas lights on the other houses. So obviously about 6 months has passed. But it's never once brought up. And in Hereditary as well, these things are never brought up. You just assume it's all within the span of a couple weeks, but I don't know. It could have been 6 months. It could have been a year. You never really know.
I will say I had assumed it was a couple of months just because of the academic year. And they said in the summer they were going to go to a trip. And I just assumed it based off of being in university that must have meant that following. But the death, I had kind of figured it must have been
because of the snow, right?
Yeah, that was the only I didn't see the lights. So I didn't know about the lights, and I kind of I think when you're talking about in the background scene when they show how she killed herself, I think you see the lights, right?
I think so. And the only reason I bring it up, because it sounds kind of obvious, like, well, duh, there was snow and now it's summer, is that Hereditary set in Utah, and we don't really know where she's going to university. So it could be one of those places where it's fucking
It
snowing
always
in
snows.
April, you know?
No, yeah,
And
definitely,
so
or
not,
spring.
Not as much time has passed.
I think a
But-
couple. I think I would say a couple months though.
I think even that though, adding the small touch of like it's been 6 months and she still can hardly get out of bed.
Correct.
And maybe that's why Christian is being a little bit more of an asshole. I don't think anything he does is forgivable in any sense in this movie. I honestly think he's a truly awful character. But I will say that you know, he's got that it's been 6 months, you're still sad, you know, energy.
I mean, fuck this movie. The internet, I think, kind of clinged onto it because of it, but it's completely true. Is like Gaslighter 101, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this is he is just. I mean, I've seen videos. I've seen all, you know, me and you joke about all the top G stuff. This guy's an Andrew Tate watcher.
Yeah.
Definitely. I just, oh my God. There's so many things I hear I think she just loves him so much, but he would have made her life so much easier had he really just broken up with her. That would have been better for her instead of the gaslight type of shit that he was doing. As somebody who has never really partaken in abusing anybody mentally in that way, it is very frustrating to see a person emotionally be abused that way, I guess I would say, especially when you're so loved, and that's what Danny really does for him in this movie. And I think one of the hitting lines that everybody kind of clinged on to is, does he feel like home to you, Daddy?
Mm-hmm.
And this motherfucker's not home.
Yeah,
it could be the
definitely.
furthest thing
So,
from it.
Since we're talking about these characters so much, let's bring them up here. So Danny, Florence Pugh, wonderful performance. I'm gonna rate it just under Toni Collette's performance in Hereditary.
I want to say,
But-
just for me, this is the reason why I want to watch everything she's in this movie.
Yeah, of course. This was the moment, right?
Yeah, for me,
Because
yeah.
I had seen her in this Netflix horror movie that she did previous to this, which was kind of like they were like ghost hunters, but they were essentially like the Scooby-Doo gang, but then, you know, the shit ended up being real.
No,
So,
okay.
you know what I mean? And then, yeah, I've kind of been a Florence Pugh fan since then.
Okay.
But before that, I think she was kind of just bumping around, you know, making a name for herself. But this really was the thing. And I think this performance is so good that it has kind of bumped her into being like prestige. You know what I mean? Even though she's in Black Widow, you know, get your bag. But
I mean, she was the reason I watched Don't Worry, Darling.
yeah, she I do think that if Don't Worry, Darling had been someone else, that it would have been an even bigger disaster
Yeah.
than it ended up being.
Yeah. I agree.
Girl Matrix, hello. But then her role in Greta Gerwig's Little Women, right?
Uh-huh.
So and then
Yeah,
even now
exactly.
there's another movie that's on Netflix called The Wonder that is also, you know, snobby high drama movie. So Florence Pugh is definitely one of our more prestigious young actors, and she's gonna be in Dune. I knew you were gonna say it. And then to round out the cast, you know, this shitty, horrible, awful person we're talking about is Jack Rayner, who plays Christian, and then his homies, they're just the worst.
Eyebrows.
William Jackson Harper, Will Poulter, doing that fucking little stinker face, you know. He's got such a punchable face, right? And then Wilhelm Blomgren, who's playing Pele, and talk about he had you in the first half, right? He's
Yeah.
like the epitome of that as a character. Like, I don't know any other character that had me more in the first half.
He's European. He's like, he's nice. He's come on.
Oh, he's good. He's chill, you know?
He's just different.
But yeah, I remember the first time watching this movie, you know, because you don't know shit, just thinking to myself, I was like, this motherfucker really got me. Like, I didn't think that he was in on this at all.
Yeah. I and then, like I said, kind of what prompted this. The only other ones kind of here, the Connie and Simon, right? Which Connie, I had when I
Glorified
rewatched
extras, but go on.
when I watched this movie. No, the other reason I wanted to pick it up was when I watched the movie. I was like, she's in the Earth. That's her.
Yeah, it is her.
So, you know, I recognize her for some reason. It's an actress that she's been in a lot as a side actress. Simon, I always get confused with the Dungeons and Dragons
Justice
Detective Pikachu. Yeah. And then, like, every time I see him, I'm like, that? No, it's not him. But
No,
he's also in Bo's Afraid, so that'll be interesting.
Hey, there you go. Recurring cast. You know what I'm wondering, honestly, is if Florence Pugh's performance will end up being the third best performance because of, like,
Yeah. Joaquin
what
Phoenix.
happens when Bo is Afraid comes out? Are you just like, ooh, like I don't know if he's ever gonna beat Toni Collette in Hereditary, but who knows? Maybe all of a sudden we're sitting here talking about a world where Florence Pugh's the quote worst performance in an Ari Aster movie. Not that there's actually
Worst
anything
lead,
wrong
right?
with it,
Yeah.
but just like this is not the strongest character. Who knows? I'm really excited to see if Bo is Afraid is going to be a fucking disaster.
I will say,
I don't think it is.
I don't think so. I do have some energy or feel like if anybody's going to displace Toni Collette from Hereditary, it might be Joaquin Phoenix. I have no idea if Ari Aster's even discussed what he's going to do next.
He's so good, but also it's kind of just like, it's just Joaquin Phoenix. Like, are we really going to just every time he's in a movie be like, oh, he's so good? I mean, he is, but
We have to wait for it. I also think based off what we were talking about, that if it's not a horror movie, I would completely start judging it differently. It would be hard to really see which one would be better than the other one, because I think Toni Collette's performance only really stands out to me so much because it's so strong for a horror movie. Like it's really, really strong for a horror movie.
Yeah, it's a family drama performance.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
not a horror performance. Oh man. How do we break this movie down? I mean, we're not going to go scene by scene or anything, but should we?
Yeah, I mean,
Do you have a synopsis on the top of your head? Not one that you pulled up, but like, how would you describe this movie to somebody?
The overall thing, I guess, here is that there's college students who are going for an archaeology trip. One of them is doing their thesis. The other of them this is a commune that he lives in, so he's bringing them just back home for summer. What is back home for some people? Very weird cult, but I think that's really is a culmination. But I think the big driving part here is that Danny is going through an emotional wreck, and she seems to find herself in this really weird cult.
Yeah, I think you did it pretty good, right? Like, it's a hard movie to describe, but it also isn't really.
Yeah.
Know?
I think the intricacies of what we know, what makes it complicated in a good movie, are you have to see it.
Definitely, like just by some people like don't tell me anything, right? But I feel like even if I say that, oh, this girl's going through a breakup, her parents died, she goes and visits a cult in Sweden. What? Like, okay, I definitely need to see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Another movie that would make me think of that is like Lamb.
Uh-huh.
How do you describe that to anybody? Like, there's a baby. It's like it's half a lamb. It's half a person.
Interestingly enough, I think that's why when we watched the trailer again before this, you said the trailer kind of threw you off.
Kinda
I think
mid.
Lamb does the same thing, because everything you get from the movie you couldn't possibly get from the trailer.
There's a lot of like romantic comedy, like moments in the trailer, where he's like, oh, you're going to come to Sweden. You know what I mean? Where you're just like, what am I?
Also, I think there's just a small note in the trailer that could lead for you to think what you're saying, for you to walk out and be like, oh, so this girl's going through something deep and she's going to Sweden, because he just said, I'm sorry for what happens, and she gets up and she's sad. But that's it.
Yeah,
the rest of it is just...
They don't allude to the family actually being dead, right?
Or they don't tell you what it is, and then the rest of it is how nice this place looks. The sets that we talked about. Yeah.
So
I mean, do you know if this was shot in Sweden?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
Like-
Let me double check. Like specifically Sweden, not like, oh, it's actually Switzerland.
Yeah, or this was shot in Nebraska.
Yeah.
Not that I care, you know what I mean, but I'm just saying because the same thing as Lamb. There's just certain schemes or landscapes that we visit in these movies that, as being from Southern California, I've never been too exposed to, and they kind of really just help me indulge in the ambiance of the movie. And this looks like a place where this stuff would go down. Why is this mountain where she throws herself off so high up? You know what I mean? So that is, I think, my favorite aspect.
Oh, it was shot in Budapest.
Oh, I mean, okay, at least it was
So,
just...
Hungary.
I always wonder if it's just because it's cheaper to shoot in some other places.
It
you
is.
know?
It's always for tax reasons too. Fucking fraudsters.
Like
This shit is fucking
This
taxes.
isn't even
This is money
Sweden.
laundering. Yeah.
Anyways,
Let me
over
see
here, like
here.
Sweden looks so nice, but when you should be telling me not to visit Hungary.
Yeah, exactly. They always do this bullshit. Like I just saw someone say the other day they're talking about the Asteroid City trailer, and they were like,
Shit was shot in the studio, huh?
they were like, no, I'd be like, he's shooting like what is like this American ass movie, but he's shooting it somewhere in Europe. And like my man is in a full fairy tale mode. Like my man Wes Anderson does not live in reality. Stop trying to tie his movies to reality. You know,
He's like, this is so American. Shot in Hungary.
yeah.
Shot in Norway.
It's like how what's it called? The Power of the Dog was shot in New Zealand, and you're like, wow, America's beautiful.
God, dude. Hey, or the
Wow, Wyoming is gorgeous.
all the like big budget movies for some reason always have Georgia.
Oh yeah, that's because that's like the cheapest place in the United
Yeah,
States.
exactly. Yeah.
You get the most tax money back there.
I knew I recognized the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But I mean,
Why does Gotham City look like Pittsburgh?
but regardless of that, that I do think that's where we talked about the budget. Martin Scorsese kind of talks about it in the little prelude that he does for that A24 booklet about how he was maybe even a little nervous because he was so impressed by Hereditary of what, you know, a second movie always kind of stumps most directors, even a lot of great directors, because they feel the pressure of having been blessed with sometimes be like a masterpiece as their first movie. Ari Aster here, I think, doesn't really fall to the pressure. I think he really does what he wants to do here, and I think how he uses his budget is the reason. Like I think someone like you who says that you can't choose between your two kids, I think that's the reason where it bumps up. Where you're like, well, this movie looks better than Hereditary. I can't take that from it. You know what I mean?
There's so many things where you're like, this is bigger. I don't want to say bigger is always better, but in the right hands, sometimes, you know. And I'm not like I prefer the story of Hereditary more, right? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
of
a more
course.
traditional horror movie.
You
or
connect with
whatever.
it, like you said.
I'm very connected to it on a personal level. But this movie, I can appreciate it. Not that I think it's like an art house movie, but like I appreciate it as a beautiful work of art.
Yeah,
you know, like
me
a
too.
true experience that immerses you in a world unlike anything like other than a movie can do. You know, like I think it's the ultimate movie.
I will say, based off of some of the more I would say more art house driven directors that I've seen, that I purposely have gone into knowing that these guys are just all about you know, allusions and similes and metaphors and scripture and stuff like that. Is I think some of these parts in here sometimes do remind me of some stuff that I would have seen in Jodorowsky's work, and I think to kind of see
Like
that
the Holy Mountain or something like that.
yeah, you know what I mean, or even like El Topo, but like it's not something that you would think you would compare for this movie. And I think the fact that I could even draw those comparisons, or not obviously in the same vein because they're not the same type of genres, but even Russian director Tarkovsky, just because of how much emotionally driven and more about like the poesy of life, how life is more of a poem. And I think Ari Aster kind of doesn't necessarily go all the way in there.
Not like that.
Yeah, not because he's not trying to be a nobody's gonna understand this kind of director. He's trying to still connect it, but I think that he understands the beauty in the unknown and the unexplored, and sometimes that is the really dark parts of emotions. You know?
Poetic cinema.
Yeah.
That's what he makes.
He just sprinkles it enough.
I don't want to actually say this because I don't know if I actually mean it, but I do feel similar to when I watch like Stanley Kubrick movies. And I think it's because I think he feels so sure of himself and such a tight control over the movie that I don't know if I get that from any other director that's working really today.
Yeah, I mean,
Like I love Jordan Peele, but I don't think he's like Stanley Kubrick. I think he's more like Alfred Hitchcock.
or Spielberg,
I love
right?
fucking or I love Robert Eggers, but I don't think of him like I think of Stanley Kubrick. You know, I think of him more of like somebody who would make like I don't know, like epics,
Bohr. I think of him more like the guy who made Excalibur.
Oh, John Borman.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's kind of just because the last movie. But I'm thinking of overall the three movies. You know, I don't think somebody like Stanley Kubrick. I just, Julia Ducournau. Be like, I don't think of her like that. There's just something about the way Ari Aster has like a sense of control over his movies and feels so sure of himself that it just reminds me of. and how the movies are two halves, you know, like I do think of like, you know, The Shining is always the shining example, no pun intended, but how, or like even Full Metal Jacket, like how the movie or 2001, how the movie could be cut right through the middle of like, this was the first half and now this is the second half, and kind of like the reward you get for having been patient in the first half.
I get also the maybe the Eggers may have seen equal in merit before maybe the Northman, and I think maybe seeing that he had to give some of that up doesn't seem very Kubrick, right?
Yeah, I don't think Ari Aster gives anything.
Yeah, like in this third movie, in Beau Was Afraid, he told A24, "This is what I'm doing," and they were like, "Okay," and that's like that sounds very Stanley Kubrick.
Because Robert Eggers moved out of A24 and into a bigger studio where he's gonna just have to give up some control.
Yeah, exactly.
But some people thrive within limitations, you know. But I don't think of Ari Aster as that kind of director because he hasn't been put in that spot yet. I mean, even that short movie that he did about the like, there's something strange about the Johnsons.
No one told him what to do.
Movie where, you know, a son fucking sexually abuses his father. He like, whoever financed that could have been like, nah. You know?
Yeah.
But I don't know. You know, it's not like Ari Aster's some Riz Lord. You know what I mean? Like, he's very much like this nebbish, small, like type of guy. You know what I mean? But
there's no Chad.
Yeah, he's not like Ty West. You know what I mean? Or like, you know, he's not fucking the Chad Zack Snyder when he walks into a room hanging his nuts on the table.
Chad Stahelski.
No, yeah, he's not like that at all. But this guy fucking just, I don't know what he says to get these people to agree to give him money to do these things.
Give this weirdo the money he wants. I want to see what he's gonna come up with.
Shut him up already.
Yeah. Like we had previously talked about, A24's biggest budget movie now is gonna be Beau Is Afraid, and I think that's just him swinging his big dick and being like, "You guys want to make this, right?" And they do, and we will be there.
You know, he could have swung it back and forth with the 4 hours, but who knows? Maybe we'll get the 4 hour cut. How we have the Midsommar almost 3 hour or over 3 hour cuts. It's movie long as hell. But let's talk about some of our favorite moments about the movie, or even just favorite things about the movie, right? There's no point in really getting into it beat by beat. We're way too far in to be doing that now. But do you want to start with like the locations? Because I know you said that earlier, that's probably one of your favorite things, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really just adds to the being somewhere you would be completely unrecognized, and kind of adding to what you said. I like the fairy tale aspect of the movie. I think this movie is shot in a lot of white highlighted bright light, and I think it makes it look very fairy,
blown out almost
dreamy. Yeah, and I think it has to do a lot of Danny's whole life after what's happened to her the past 6 months feel like a fucking dream, and daylight or night, and there's not a lot of night shots in this, but in the daylight it's very disorienting. I think it's almost like you said, too bright, and I think that's on purpose. But I will say that this land seems to highly just reflect the fairy tale, and there seems to be this calmness and acceptance that I think is really unsettling to, you know, somebody who's completely used to the opposite of that.
Yeah. Sorry, I was reading something about I was trying to read about the camera details because both of those movies are shot digitally, so I wanted to bring up what they are. I'm trying to find it, but then I got, technical specs. So let me see here. Holy shit. Okay. Bringing up the runtime and how long this movie is. It went from 2 hours and 28 minutes to 2 hours and 52 minutes.
They had it 30 minutes.
So what I was actually reading right now, I was going to look for the camera stuff, but then I started getting distracted, was that it adds to a bunch of scenes, right? So, like, let me see here.
Certain scenes are longer, like you said.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's a lot of scenes that are, let's see here. The party scene where she's like, "You're going to Sweden," you know, that's extended. That's longer than it is. The car ride, Christian's anthropological research, the after the ritual suicide of the two old people. What's the special?
The night scene, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to remember. The last one doesn't really describe in too much detail what it's actually talking about, because I'm like, the special scene. I'm trying to think of what that is. But anyways.
Oh, I will say that final act of this movie did feel a lot longer. Like once they find out, once you find out the horror stuff that's going on with Christian and what's like, how they view him, I felt like her realization and moment of triumph felt a lot longer to me in this director's cut. Like I like the good for her moment felt very long, and I was like, damn, she really thrives.
So my favorite thing, other than the locations, it might be the music, but I just think overall it's just the artistry. Honestly, like how the production design, it's got to be those paintings. It's got to be the ruins in the cabin. That small little house that Christian goes into when they ask him if he'd like to mate with Maya. The tapestry that has like what's about to happen on it with like the love potion and stuff. Just the way that they draw like the guy after he consumes the love potion and his eyes become like spirals. Just small stuff like that. And just the care with all the details, like the small things, like when Danny becomes the May Queen and she's traveling across the landscape in front of us and you can see the sister with the mask on her face all in the tree. You know what I mean? Like the stuff, like that's one of the more.
That's insane. Yeah.
Wow. That's. Mwah. You know what I mean? Like, look at this guy. Look at this fucking guy. You know what I mean? Or another one I wanted to bring up was like we talked about, like when they are on shrooms and the way that the trees are moving. Just like the fact that carries on throughout the entire movie. It isn't just something that he shows you once and is like, okay, when you're on drugs, this is what it looks like. But during the May Queen dance, during some of the dinner sequences, like the crown being alive and the flowers breathing on her head. I just love so much of that stuff.
The moment when she,
hell yeah, this is a way to fucking spend money. I wouldn't call this art house, but this is better than art house can be sometimes,
But the moment she, during her realization, she sees her mother, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's like that. That's just those.
That's another one of those small details where it's like blink and you miss it. Literally, just blink and it would already be gone.
And because if you don't see that it looks like her, you would just be like, why did she start saying mom? Like, because you might have blinked and not seen that she actually does pass by her. I will say that I thought that something very interesting about this movie is that the sets, kind of what we talked about, the houses and everything that you're talking about, does look like something Toni Collette's character would have made a small miniature of the dollhouses.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, that's how much care there seems to be in these plays, and I know that it really plays really well because it just makes you think that because this community is really tight and everything, that they obviously have built this a long time ago and they take very good care, and that's why this building is like this. But I think in the fact that we know that it just was made for a movie as a set, and for it to seem like it's something that's actually real, I think just kind of talks about what you're talking about, the carefulness and masterful overlook that Ari Aster has as a director.
Yeah, just so much consideration into the craft.
I mean, the bear's real, right?
Probably.
I mean, they're like, cause they go, is that a bear?
It's just a bear in a cage. It's not like they're asking him to do anything.
Yeah, it could be like a trained bear.
It would be even something you would be worried about, like safety wise.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're gonna bring a bear on set. It's just gonna be in the cage.
They just asked him to bring it in the cage. Yeah. And
remember they sold the bear in the cage, A24.
Yeah.
They sold like a little action figure bear in cage thing. That's cool.
That's like when they first were just like randomly
marketed to.
Yeah, I mean, I love Marvel kids like when they do little action figures. I like when they release a little mermaid soap from the lighthouse.
I too like to consume.
But besides that, yeah, we talked about the specs I really enjoy in this movie, but at the end of the day, I just really like kind of Christian's demise here. I think that is my favorite. I think
it's such a satisfying downfall.
The ending scene, once everything hits shit on the fan, just like Hereditary, at the end, I think that's when you just really realize how actually crazy an aspect of like these people are to how much what you talked about, the cult and what they believe in makes a lot of sense. But once you see one of the cult members kind of sacrifice himself and is burning on fire and giving these yells, and then all of them are kind of feeling for it, you're like, what are you guys doing? You know what I mean?
I do think, not just because it's the climax, but that's probably my favorite scene in the movie is that ritual sacrifice, because it's so gorgeously shot. The music is just so beautiful and heavenly. It's what I would want the music to sound like in heaven, you know. And then just like the temple itself, and then the way that they shoot it. Like, to me, this is cinema. The scene where you could see, it's the wide shot, right? And it's Danny staring at the temple. The temple's burning. The door's open. You can see the fire, and then only the silhouette of the bear suit, and you can see it like burning.
Yeah.
And I like, you know, like I didn't actually happen, but I'm like, I could cry. This is
No,
so
no,
beautiful.
but that's,
you know what
that's
I mean?
yeah.
Like,
no, I agree.
This is so painterly. This is movie making.
I think that's when you have all these
Tarkovsky
lenses.
shit. That shot right there, you know, like of the what's the movie he has where the cabin's burning?
Mirror. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think I am 100% in agreement with you, like that scene, and he knows that's, I think, again, kind of Martin Scorsese's little prelude here, understanding the language of cinema. He said that's why Ari Aster stood out to him whenever he's looking at new directors, is this director very obviously understands the language of cinema.
Yeah.
And I think that scene specifically, and not just that, but that scene specifically, he understands that is the perfect shot to conclude everything we just saw. That a scene like that shows you the perfect intricacy, the perfect symmetry and the building that it was made, which is really cool looking, the triangle.
Yeah, like the triangle barn.
And he tells them, like, that's a sacred place, we're not allowed in there.
Yeah.
So it looks like that. It's shot, framed, amazing. And like you said, where our subject is found, kind of alluding again to the framing and what we can see in the shot and how it's everything in the background, I think is just literally, if you could, you know, I like having posters of movies. If you could just have one picture to basically describe to you what this movie is, I think that would be the shot. I think it would be the shot of that on fire with the bear, like the silhouette and stuff. And
I mean, I guess one of my favorite parts of the Ari Aster movies is obviously the cinematography. But so like Paweł Pogorzelski and like his work, like what him and Ari Aster do together is just so beautiful, you know, like it really is, like you said, like the language of cinema. They know how to convey that in these shots that are so well framed. They're so precise. The movement in the frame, like, you know, like how the characters enter and exit the movie, you know, like it's just so good, dude. And it, like, I really do think that he's probably technically one of the better filmmakers working today, and then cinematographers as well, like this tandem. So as experimental as Beau is Afraid looks, I can't wait to see like what it's actually going to look like. Like, I feel like we've gotten a lot of the artsy fartsy fucking
clips of,
you know, yellow brick roads and cornfields, and
look how crazy this thing's gonna be.
You know, Beau is Afraid somehow kind of looks like Elf when he's making it to New York. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
there's
like, so there's all that stuff which I'm very much interested in seeing as well. But I'm just like, I can't wait to see how gorgeous this can actually look, because I know what they're capable of. Yeah,
I think just to kind of tie up what I think is the perfect meaning of what we're talking about is, at the end of this movie, does Danny look at me and tell me that she's satisfied with herself, or do they portray all of that with one fucking image? And I think that just really,
the Kubrick stare, dude.
it just really nails to me.
She literally did it.
That how can you just give me one grin and I'm like, I understand. You know what I mean? That is the language of cinema, and I think that is Martin Scorsese can appreciate when a director has obviously spent his time learning the craft and also paying respect to what works in the past. I think we've obviously talked about we're over past 100 years of filmmaking, and there's certain directors who have stood the test of time because they cracked at what is really effective. And there's, you know, we're sitting here in 2023 and we still bring up directors like Alfred Hitchcock, and it's because maybe at the time they were seen as hacks and stuff like that. But in retrospect, they have things that have worked and really work for the human emotion. I think Ari Aster really understands those components of filmmaking, but also really understands that he's a freak and can add all these different dynamics to those same stories. Yeah. You know what? How do you feel about his comparison that he made himself, is that he wanted to make a really fucked up version of The Wizard of Oz? Do you find that to be a successful mission statement, that he did what he set out to do? Yeah. For this one? Yeah, like that's the point of this movie, is that it's like a fucked up version of The Wizard of Oz. Yeah, I mean, because again, if you really compare the character trope between
Dorothy.
Dorothy, yeah. I was gonna say
I was
Wendy.
waiting to see how long it takes.
I was gonna say Wendy for some reason.
That's Peter Pan.
Yeah, Dorothy's and Florence Pugh Danny here. I mean, obviously it's a way different story, but the plot, I mean, the character arc is pretty similar. She comes to acceptance of what she
This new world too, like entering this new world. It's almost like Alice in Wonderland too, a little bit, you know.
And being, master of both worlds, right, or whatever.
Yeah. I wonder if she ever goes in the sequel. Does she go back to New York? Huh?
I will say, I think for some reason when you said that, I was like, I feel like that's how I feel that Bo is afraid to give me that.
Bo is afraid is Jewish Lord of the Rings. That's what he said.
Sick.
So
nice.
Yeah. That's how he described it. So this is Wizard of Oz, and that's Lord of the Rings.
I was just like hearing it because I think when a director kind of directly connects it to something, it's kind of always the same conversation that me and you have in terms of what idea did I get after I watched this movie that I didn't like, and what would I make out of it. Is he does the same thing to movies he really likes, and it's like, well, how do I add my freakish opinions or these thoughts that I've had and still kind of get the audience to leave with the same amount of conclusions or thoughts that you would in a movie like The Wizard of Oz, right?
Yeah, dude. I don't know if you saw that his mission statement with Bo is afraid is like, I wanted to put you in the shoes of a loser so you could experience what it's like. And then they're like, well, I guess most of film Twitter doesn't even need to go see this.
No, oh,
it's like,
man.
me, I don't need to see Bo is afraid. I already know what that's like.
I've come across, obviously, some of the people who got the surprise viewing at the Texas, the Alamo Draft House.
It should have been me.
Yeah. I've come across some of their small reviews, the non-spoiler reviews, and my favorite one so far is Bo is Afraid. It's just a movie about a guy who really needs to nut.
Yeah,
and I think you got me, man. You got me, man. Like, there's
I'm so horny, my back hurts.
Yeah, exactly. I just think I've come across incels. I've come across mama boys, and there is a lot of deep, dark stuff there.
From a like a face comparison. Joaquin Phoenix kind of reminds me of the character from Punch Drunk Love that Adam Sandler plays,
yeah, man.
Like just kind of on that same line of like, yeah, you really could just use you could use some sex. Huh?
You a loser. Yeah.
You're a loser, bro.
Yeah, no. Which I think again is gonna be something that he might be commenting on a whole different aspect. We've gotten a lot, like you said, about family centered stuff with him. Obviously, this has to do with his mom. Maybe that's the common connections maybe between these three. Maybe it's like a trilogy, right?
It's a family trilogy. It's a trilogy of these family movies.
Family issues. I'm just obviously we're kind of going ahead of ourselves a bit here, but because these kind of concluding it back to Midsommar, because these two movies have been so. Like, I've really just stood out to me. And also because Ari Aster has kind of really cemented his style for me. When this was Disappointment Boulevard, we already had it in our watch list. It didn't even matter what it was called. It didn't matter when it came out. It could have came out 10 years from now.
Come out last year. I'm pretty sure we talked about it then in our most anticipated.
Yeah. So
this and Killers of the Flower Moon. Come on.
There's just so many. There's just a few movies that certain directors have been able to keep our attention for. This is one of them where if somebody argues to me that Midsommar to them is a better movie than Hereditary, I'll hear out the argument. You know what I mean? I think their movies are good enough where I could be like, okay. I think it is such more connected to what you can relate to more, which is kind of sad because these movies, like you said, have to deal a lot with trauma. So I wouldn't really want to connect in these movies in any way unless obviously you have no choice in that. But for the horror that these movies derive from and what they can really draw out of somebody who is really indulged in these movies, I think isn't too comparable to other stuff.
I just think it's kind of like what you said earlier when you had read somebody kind of complaining about his style, where it's Ari Aster going, this is what death feels like. This is what a breakup feels like. This is what going to see your mom feels like. And it's just, for some people who, they find him to be agreeable, where they're like, yeah, this is exactly what this feels like, And then for other people, it's like, no, you're just, I don't know. I don't like the way you make a big show out of these things and exaggerate emotions. Be like, I don't know what you want in a movie. Then
Yeah.
I kind of don't see the complaint, because for me, it's like, well, isn't the point of a movie to exaggerate these emotions and tell these stories and for it to not be realistic?
I think there's like a shot right now that I think just really, for me, hits poignant to both of the sides of this. After Danny falls asleep after the ceremony where the two elder people drop themselves off in the tower, she's obviously at a very, very weird mental state and is even having the dream of them being the parents. Mm-hmm. And I think the input of that scene of her having the dream and them being the parents is Ari Aster recognizing that if he doesn't do that, will the audience be able to successfully recognize why Danny is even having pessimistic emotions towards this ceremony, right?
Yeah.
And I think that maybe that's where the heavy-handedness of somebody thinking the movie isn't deep comes into, because other directors like the weirdos that I brought up before do not take the time to do that, because they just go, well, fucking think about what I just showed you. Obviously, if she's sad, she's connecting it to the one thing, the only other thing in this movie I've shown you. But I think that Ari Aster still understands how to make the movie, like you said, enough of our house movie, but still enough of a straightforward story that everybody can participate in.
Yeah. Not to put it too much on the viewer themselves, but okay, I don't think he's the most accessible filmmaker, but I also think it's like, how willing are audiences to receive messages in ways that are not just like slapping them over the head, where it's like, maybe he feels like, I have to do this because audiences are not gonna, like you said, they're not gonna understand. And like maybe somebody like Tarkovsky back in the day was kind of like, it's not really my fault if they don't understand, and then they're stupid,
And
or
it's not for them then, or it's not for them.
Exactly.
I think, but I think at the end of the day, someone like Tarkovsky, maybe coming from a war-torn country, Elian Klimov with Come and See, don't have any interest in this being mass marketed, because their only interest is in leaving a message for the world to look at years later. But Ari Aster recognized that he is a modern director and this is seen as art. And he also, why would you not want to make money?
Yeah.
why do you not want this to be successful? No, and also because at the end of the day, he wants to keep making movies, and he wants his movies to be liked by as many people as he will watch the movie. So I think that he also, while he wants to shell out his weird things that he's caught in his experiences in the world or opinions, he also understands that he has to make a movie entertaining. And I think that he has a very unique balance of that I can't give most other directors credit of.
This movie was not as big as Hereditary. Like, it did worse, but it's still a massive success. Like, it was only 9 million and it made 48. So, the audience itself was not as big. I do think it has a lot to do with how the movie, not how it's marketed, but I think audiences could kind of sniff it out. That's like, I don't think this is going to be like Hereditary, and Hereditary is kind of his, for only having 2 movies, Hereditary is his gold standard, like that is, even if people didn't think it was like, it wasn't that deep, be like, it was a very popular movie.
Him
I don't
and
think this is a popular movie.
Out of the Mount Rushmore that we've made for the podcast, him and Jordan Peele are the only ones whose golden standard has been set by their first film. And I think that kind of obviously, and golden standard because the general audiences came out to see their first movies.
Yeah. So I say all this to say that it's going to be really interesting to see how Beau is Afraid does. I feel like this is like a real litmus test for the audience, because it's not a horror movie. It's going to be extremely weird. It's very long. So I guess we'll really find out kind of what are the streets saying about Ari Aster?
Yeah, I think interestingly enough, I would be able to make a bet here that A24's clout, as they say, has grown so much here that the synergy of these two things coming together, I think I could see Beau is Afraid getting some nominations if it's really as good as people say.
Yeah, I mean, it's an April release. Everything Everywhere All at Once was a March release, and that carried all year.
Yeah.
But we're talking about 2 different types of movies.
It's just a bet at this point. I have nothing to base it off of, just that I think Ari Aster has got it like that, and I think A24 has marketed this movie as as trippy enough post Everything Everywhere All at Once, where I think people will eat it up and kind of are excited. I think people are excited for Beau is Afraid. And I don't think people were excited for Midsommar.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little distracted here because we're watching the movie and we were talking about how awful Christian is. And when Mark pees on the dead ancestor tree, Christian is like laughing, like, this is funny as fuck. And I'm just like, dude, if it wasn't Danny who hated you, like, everybody here hates you.
I think it's funny how what's Eyebrows' name? I always forget his name.
Will Poulter, his real name, Mark, or his real name is Will Poulter. It'd be like, but
Will Poulter, I think isn't it always funny how much more despicable a character gets when they're constantly vaping in a movie?
Like when they're the asshole. Whoever pulled it off and looked cool was Keke Palmer and Nope.
Yeah, and it's because she's a person that you're cheering for, right? Yeah, exactly. But the second that's already someone who's somewhat dislikable and they start vaping, it's over. They're the worst person in the fucking movie.
All right, so I think we've gone on long enough with these kind of director retrospective things that we've been doing. I think it's more fun to just kind of talk about it in a more broad sense than to actually, try to analyze and break down.
I thought we were going to try to match the runtime of the director's cut,
Fuck
man.
No. So, yeah, I mean, this was fun. I don't think this will be the last time we ever talk about these movies again. But this was a fun little series that we did. A little behind-the-scenes talk. We might see the movie next week. We might have to wait till the 21st, so maybe there'll be an episode that's like a lobby talk or something, just talking about everything else we've seen. Maybe we'll take the break. Who knows? But we'll definitely be back for Beau is Afraid.
No Mafia Mama?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. I would like to talk about the Mario movie a bit, but, when we do these director ones, I don't like to break them up with anything else. So we'll see. I like doing the episodes week to week, so maybe we'll have that lobby talk episode going out. Maybe not, but catch us for Beau is Afraid. I really am excited to talk about that one. And I can't wait to see the audience reactions and how people are either going to lose their shit or this is the second coming of cinema. So, yeah, man. Remember to check back in, like, subscribe, comment. Alvaro, do you have anything you want to say to the people before we leave?
Yeah, no, just if you just want to have movies, if you haven't seen any of these two movies, I'd highly recommend them. And definitely go show up for Beau is Afraid if you support the pod.
Good point. I think that if you haven't seen the other two, you should probably watch them before you watch Beau is Afraid, so you can get some semblance of like, what am I getting myself into? What's this guy like? I think you may find that very useful. So thank you for checking back in. See you next time. Bye.
Bye.